All right, guys, just a minute more. And then, Lyssa, is that okay? Would you like to start? What do you say?
I can start because there's just going to be mostly just an introduction, I think. Do I introduce myself?
Yeah, I can do that, or you're welcome to. Please go ahead. I think I'll hand over the space to you.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Well, I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Lyssa deHart. I am an MCC coach with the International Coaching Federation, and I am so incredibly happy to be with all of you today to have this conversation around building our foundation on trust and safety in our coaching conversations. I'm located outside of Seattle, Washington in the US. I live on Bainbridge Island, and I was just having a conversation. It's 15 degrees Celsius here right now. So that kind of gives you a sense of the difference in our climates at this very moment. So just a little sense of place where we are. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. If this is the workshop you're here for, you are in the right place. So build your foundation on trust and safety. A little of my style of presentation is that I'll stop and I'll be asking questions. Please, please, please feel free to put things in the chat. I'm going to have help from Samina and Soham to let me know if there's any questions that I miss, but I'll really be trying to also notice it there. Or if you feel brave enough, come off mute and ask your question when I stop, because I'll definitely be asking questions along the way. So let's see here. So some of the things that we're going to be exploring in our time together today is taking a look at the definition of what it means to cultivate trust and safety, the idea of full partnership, psychological safety, how our blind spots can break trust, exploring the questions that build trust and safety, and then connecting trust and safety with the other competencies that we see in the ICF core competencies. I'm going to do my best, and we may miss something because of the amount of time we have. It's a quick session, and so I'll do my very best. But I would love to start with a quick question to all of you, which is, what brought you here today for this presentation? And you can throw it in the slide, I'm sorry, in the chat. That was the slide. Curiosity. That is a brilliant reason to come to a presentation. I love that. And I'm going to ask the second question also. What would you like to leave today's webinar with? The very topic and how important it is to us as coaches. Absolutely. The importance of trust and how it impacts coaching. Improving empathy. Yeah. As a PCC, really as an ACC, PCC, and MCC, learning from anybody. I'm still always learning from other coaches. Continuous improvement, knowledge, sharper awareness, and how to create a safe environment for my clients. New awareness, beautiful. Well, I hope that we will leave with ongoing improvements and awareness and knowledge and some fun too. I hope we're having fun. So Cultivates Trust and Safety is defined by the International Coaching Federation as partnering with a client to create a safe, supportive environment that allows the client to share freely, maintains the relationship of mutual respect and trust. And I love the definition because I think it just sums up what it is that we're doing as we cultivate trust and safety. Whoops, I think I went past something. Hold on, let me go back. So the indicators, and I think this is really important, the indicators of trust and safety have to do with really being present with our clients around what their identity is, their experience, their environment, their values, and their beliefs. And it is that capacity of the coach to have their own values, beliefs, identity, culture, environment, but also to step into the world of another human being. and that the coach is demonstrating respect for these differences, and as well as the perceptions of meaning that come up for clients, whether that is what a word means, or if they've made a facial expression, what that facial expression means. I had a coaching session with a client one day, and I asked a question, and the client made this face that was like, and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting face, but I didn't know what it meant. It almost, in my interpretation, looked like I had upset her with the question. So I just asked, what just happened there? What does that face mean? And she goes, that's the face I make when my mind is blown, because she was really locking down insight that she was having. And so she made a really contemplative face that looked a little angry to me. And I think it's the non-assumption that we're going for in trust and safety, assuming nothing, respecting and acknowledging our clients' unique talents and insights in the work, showing support and empathy. And most coaches do this incredibly naturally. It's the other things that we sometimes forget to do because we're so empathetic and compassionate with our clients that we have so much concern for them. Acknowledges and supports the client to express anything that shows up for them, whether it's a feeling, a perspective, a concern, a belief that maybe we don't understand, or suggestions that they have for even the coaching itself, and having the client really lead these conversations. So, and a transparency and vulnerability where we're with our clients in that way. And so I think openness and transparency as a way to display vulnerability and build trust for the client can sometimes be difficult to understand, but it might be transparently naming a bias that just showed up. It could be a negative bias, like, you know, I'm feeling like I really want you to be successful and move towards your goal, you know, and I feel like we're getting stalled out here. That might be a negative perception that we have of the situation, or it could be a really positive one. Like, I just feel like rooting for you like a cheerleader, and maybe neither of those is like needed by the client. So naming it and just saying, like, you know, I'm noticing a bias show up here for me, and I'm wanting to, you know, root for you. But before I even do that, I'd really like to explore what's showing up for you. And we turn it back to the client. Let's see, my slides aren't moving that quickly. So I really think that the PCC markers are incredibly useful for understanding the behavioral indicators of Cultivates, trust, and safety. And so when you are moving towards your MCC and even your PCC, these are in some ways the markers that your coach assessor would be listening for in your coaching conversations around trust, Cultivates, trust, and safety, where the coach is really acknowledging and respecting the client's unique talents, insights, and the work in the process, supporting empathy and concern for the client, acknowledging and supporting their expression of feelings, perceptions, concerns, and that they're partnering, really fully partnering with the client, inviting them to respond in any way, shape, or form that they feel like. I think the other competencies that show up under trust and safety come from things like coaching mindset, our capacity to regulate our own emotional state, right? If we're feeling flustered or frustrated or super excited, our ability to really manage our own emotional state is important. That we're remaining open and aware to context and culture of our own as well as our clients, setting clear agreements, right out of agreement setting and ethics, partnering with the client to identify or reconfirm what they want to accomplish. Oftentimes coaches will say, what would you like to talk about today? And the client will say, this is my topic. And they're often running without a fuller, deeper exploration into what is important about that topic for the client. What would be meaningful in the conversation so that the coach is getting that container of the coaching conversation around what's really important, you know, what the client would like to have as a success measure by the end of the conversation, so that the coach has a sense of what's important to the client, but as well as where the client really is wanting to go through the conversation, and the client is leading that conversation. Comfortable in working with a space of not knowing. I think this is one of those situations where it can be incredibly difficult for coaches to let go of the needing to know everything, like all the details of the situation, or really not knowing the answer to the question that they're asking. And I think that that is part of that partnership and builds trust and safety, is that I'm not leading the client to what I think the client needs to be doing, but rather I'm willing to ask them a question and let them go anywhere they want to with it. And I'm asking a question that I do not know the answer to. So if I ask a question, and we'll go into that actually a little bit further. So I'm going to let you read all these. I'm not going to read them all to you, but these come from the other competencies. And so trust and safety is really woven throughout the competencies. So this really brings us to what is full partnership. And I know that it's easier for you guys maybe to see it this way, but it's harder for me. I need to be able to see some other stuff. So I'm going to do it this way. I'll just make it a little bit bigger. What is full partnership? So anybody who would like to come offline, online, or write it into your into the chat, what do you think of when you consider full partnership in a coaching conversation or a coaching relationship? What does full partnership mean to you? Yeah, that there's an equal, both are equal in this partnership. I don't know how familiar you are with the idea of transactional analysis, but there's sort of this idea of parent, adult, child, and it's really the adult to adult. In coaching, I really think of it as expert, adult, or equal, novice. And I think a big piece of really building trust and safety and cultivating that in our relationships is that we're coming from adult to adult, peer to peer, and not expert to novice. We're not in the role of telling our clients what they're supposed to do. So this partnership piece is really, from my experience, the growth edge for most coaches, because it does exactly that. It creates psychological safety. So thank you for sharing that. And it is the way that we ask and invite the client to help us, guide us through the conversation that is important to them. I have a visual of this, of full partnership. And I use this actually, before I move there, this metaphor of the blind, the hands over the eyes is really important to me when I'm thinking about the context of my own coaching, from the perspective of, I see myself as a blind person being led as I put my hand lightly on the shoulder of another human being, and they are leading me through their internal landscape. And I think it is just crucial that I'm allowed to ask questions like, wow, I noticed that the road beneath my feet feels like it's getting rocky. What are you noticing? I'm noticing that it seems like there's maybe a lot of foliage around us right now, or I'm smelling flowers. I get to name the things that I'm experiencing in this conversation, yet I am asking meaning from the client still. And so part of what I do in my own coaching is, if I make an observation, like, I'm wondering, I hear a pattern showing up in this conversation, I reflect that insight or awareness that I'm having, I'm noticing this pattern, and then I ask a follow-up open-ended question. As you hear me say that, what are you noticing? Might be the way that I follow that up, because I don't want to assume that there's a pattern going on that for the client, but I want to notice it because it showed up for me, share it with them, but then ask the meaning that the client is making. And that's a bit of being led, right? Like I'm noticing something show up, and then I'm asking the question. So explore and ask your client for directions. When we ask a client, what would make this a really useful conversation today? What do you want to leave here with? what we're doing is we're setting a container of a map of the conversation. This is what's really important to me. This is what I'm thinking I need by the end of the conversation. So we have that linkage from the beginning to the end, which also helps for the coach as we're going through the conversation. We have places where we can touch base. If the client says, I really want to have, tools, what do tools give you? More confidence. So maybe what we're really doing is we're looking at the confidence issue and we're moving towards more confidence. So then I might stop through the conversation. What else needs to be explored that would help you to have more confidence? It gives me touch points along the map that the client has given to me. Does that make sense as you hear me saying that? Does that click in with the things that you have experienced yourself, where when you have a clear understanding of what's important and an agreement about where you're going, that you end up having places where you can touch base and ask the client? Because then the client can redirect us, is my experience at any rate. Noticing these emotional words and energy shifts. Thank you, Sophia. Affirmative. Noticing emotional words and energy shifts. What just happened there? What I noticed a deep sigh. What was the deep sigh? I remember listening to a coach that was really had a powerful conversation, and the client was silent for a very long time. And the coach really just let that silence sit. And then at some point she asked, what's showing up in the silence? Rather than fill it with another question about the tools that the client stated they needed, she just asked, what's right now, what's showing up for you? And the client was able, because it's from inside of them, the coach doesn't have any clue what the answer to this question is, but because it's coming from inside of the client, it might be any number of things that's showing up for them. I'm noticing this tension, or I'm noticing imposter syndrome, or I'm noticing that, I've used other tools in the past that might work here. You don't know where it's going to go, but often because we're asking the client about their own internal experience, they have an answer for it. Transfer the power and learn from your client. This isn't about us having the wisdom of the ages and advising our clients of every single little thing. This is really giving them the empowerment and allowing ourselves to be in a space of learning from them. Again, the client is the expert in their own life. We are the novice, not the other way around. Reflect your client's genius, right? Like, notice when they name something, and this happens in coaching conversations often, where the client says, has a really deep insight. And the coach, instead of stopping and go, what did you just notice yourself say? How does that apply towards what you say is important to you? Where does this help you in assuming or discerning where you want to go next? We rarely stop and notice their genius like that. We're so busy thinking about the next question that we just go with the next question that's shown up in our mind, versus stopping and really inviting them to name what showed up. And to some degree, and Sophia, thank you for putting that in there, mirroring. It's mirroring. I think mirroring can kind of look like I'm matching pace and tone with my client. In my mind, when I think of mirroring, I think this is much more acknowledging when we notice something that the client shares, because clients will share amazing insights at times. Like, they'll have said a bunch of stuff, but they'll also have said something really, really important. And one of the ways that I might do this is I might notice a tonal shift where the client has gone from talking like this and they're talking really, really fast. And then as they're processing, they start to slow down. And then all of a sudden you notice that there's something really important that shows up in the space. So I might notice the shift of tone. I might say, as you were talking, there was this incredible speed at the beginning, and I noticed you really slowing down. What just happened there? What allowed you to slow down? What does the slowing down mean for you? Right? And so what we're doing is we're asking the client to look inside of themselves so that they have then have then the opportunity to self-reflect on their own experience, their own awareness. So really, so Dumi, you're asking, really seeing the client as they show up, noticing, absolutely, really noticing when we reflect our client's genius. Unhooking ourselves from the outcome. Who here has ever been hooked with the outcome and really wanted to make sure their client gets to their goal? Raise your hands if you've ever done this. Am I really the only one? Really? I don't think so. I got a hand raise. All right, we got some hands raising. It's really easy to want so much for our clients that we then take on the role and job of trying to make sure they get there. And that is not our job. Our job is to hold the space so that they get the exploration that they need, so that they can then be a choice about what's really important for them. And they may have a larger outcome of maybe leadership development. I work a lot with confidence and leadership development with my executive clients. And so it may be that that's their overarching goal. Yet, if I'm only focused on leadership development, I miss the opportunity to have the conversation about what just showed up in this conversation. Say maybe there's a new teammate and they're being asked to really step in and support this new teammate for their 30-day, 60-day, 90-day reviews, right? And now all of a sudden they're feeling overwhelmed by where do they discern between helping their teammate and also doing their own work. All of a sudden they're in a tension between how they show up in a team and how they show up taking care of their own business, right? Well, their overarching goal is still leadership development, but we're still going to need to explore what just happened here. And is it Helena? Yeah, I see your hand is up and I'm curious if it's because you have a question or because you're agreeing. No questions. Excellent. Okay. So savoring wins and insights. Again, our clients have often really powerful insights and awarenesses that show up in the conversation, and our capacity to notice those and ask them. It's a little like, I live in a forest, so it's a little like a tree falling in a forest. There's the sense of, if nobody's there to hear it, did it make a sound? And if we as coaches have conversations with our clients and the trees are falling, but nobody's really noticing them because the client's coming from a place of habit and how they always talk about this. And the coach is coming from the place of trying to be the best coach they can and really help the client get to an outcome that the coach has in their mind that they think is what's going to be important to the client. Maybe nobody's noticing these awarenesses and these insights that show up. And it ultimately breaks trust in the sense that the client never fully feels heard, never fully feels acknowledged, never feels in full partnership. Whereas the more we notice these things and ask about them from a place of curiosity with the intention that it's supportive to the client's goal, then the more the client does feel heard and acknowledged and appreciated. And then trust that your client is fully capable. And so I'm going to just pause here really quickly. How many people, as you're looking at this list of partnership, have ever had an experience, maybe it's with a coach, maybe it's with somebody else, it could be a boss, it could be a friend, it could be a parent or a family member, where you went and you shared that you were struggling with something, and instead of really listening, the person told you what to do instead. When you think about that experience, did it build trust and safety, or did it take it away? You can either come off mute or you can put this in the chat. Did it, help you feel really like it was a trust? It takes it away. Yeah, it doesn't feel respectful when we share something and somebody jumps right in to solve our problem. I wanted to stop the conversation. We lose accountability. we lose our own accountability and our own sense of empowered agency, right? When somebody tells us what to do. And here's my thinking about it. Look, as a coach, I am a short-term solution to somebody's long-term life. In a year, my ideas about what they should have done or need to do is not going to impact my life at all. I will have moved on with my own life. It will absolutely continue to impact the life of my client, what decisions they make, just like the decisions that I make for myself impact my life. And so we take that understanding from that neuroscience and understanding of how the brain works. We believe what we tell ourselves. We're much more likely to create a sustainable change if it is an inside out embodied experience that we're having in our own learning and decision making. If I feel it in my body and somebody says, instead of this is what you need to do, says instead, when has been a time where you've been able to do something similar to this? How might you take some of that learning into this situation? Or somebody asks, when you sit with this situation, where do you notice this even showing up in your body right now? I'm really noticing it in my chest or my gut. Okay, what does that tell you about this situation? What is it that informs you of? Right? Then all of a sudden now I'm having this embodied experience about my own choices and decisions. And I'm starting to, through a self-reflective inquiry with another person, get clarity for myself so that I know what's going to be most useful, right? So for coaches, it's really important that we start to allow our clients these opportunities to hear the trees that are falling, to notice their insights and awarenesses. And the biggest gift a client can ever give you, and they give them to us all the time, is asking a really powerful question. And I see coaches miss this all the time. The client just asks, like, this is a really, I think the really important question is, what is keeping me in this pattern? Like, I've heard those exact words come out of a client's mouth in a coaching demonstration, only to hear the coach ask a completely different question. And it was like a free gift that the client just gave you, was this really powerful question where we could have gone, that is a really powerful question. What is that pattern that you're noticing, right? And so then we're also demonstrating trust and safety, but we're also listening deeply. We're doing all sorts of really powerful coaching demonstrations when we ask the powerful question that the client just asked themselves. And this really is key to what was brought up earlier, which is this idea of psychological safety, right? Anytime we feel judged, what happens to our brain? Does it make our brain more creative, or does it shut our brain down and make us feel like we need to protect ourselves?
Lyssa, at times it can take us into a fight or flight space versus
Absolutely.
a more socially engaged space.
Yes. I have known very few people who can be creative, curious, and afraid at the same time, right? So fight, flight, freeze, or freak out really engage the brain to protect itself. And it isn't a physical threat necessarily. It can be an existential threat. The existential threat of not being good enough or not doing it right. How many clients have come to us because they're perfectionists and they spend all their time trying to do it right. And as soon as they hear from another person, you're not doing it right in some way, it can trigger those same sorts of feelings. And while it can be both, psychological safety is imperative to having an open mind. And an open mind, by that I mean a creative mind, a mind capable of thinking of different solutions, different ways of looking at a situation. When our brains, to the point that Samantha made, are in fight, flight, freeze, or freak out, we don't have access to that part of our mind's ability to think through things. And so really the psychological safety comes from the asking, not telling. And so how we approach our clients in this space makes it safe for them to explore. I will often say to my clients something to the effect of, if I ask a question and it's the wrong question, just tell me what a better question is. I'm totally open to that. Or if I ask a question and you don't like the question, let me know. I'm not a great mind reader, but I'm very flexible and adaptable. And they'll say, thank you. And I have clients who go, yeah, no, that's not the question that I need to answer right here. Then what is the question you need to answer right here? And they tell me. It's amazing. And then we have a much deeper, richer conversation. But what else does inviting the client to redirect us do as far as cultivating trust and safety? I'm waiting in the chat, or I'm waiting for a voice. What else does it do when we invite them to be fully empowered and in full ownership? So I'm going to move along to how our blind spots then break trust. Going back to what we had said earlier about when people tell us what to do, how it shuts the brain down and how people want to stop the conversation. It's really a blind spot where we get excited for an outcome, or we see something that client doesn't see and we make an assumption about how beneficial that will be to the client. So we get into a telling versus asking. We see the direction that we think the client should be going. And so we start leading them versus allowing ourselves to be led. And I want to say this also. I believe that all questions are leading to some degree, because we're asking a question and the client is going to be primed for a specific sort of inquiry as a result of the question that we ask. So if we're going to be leading the client somewhere, let's lead them into places we don't know the answer to, helping them to build more self-awareness so that their choices and decisions come out of their own insights and not just ours. Thinking we know what is right, assuming we know meaning, context, getting hooked by the situation. Sometimes clients come with really juicy situations. Maybe they've got like a boss and the boss just did this and it's like a big drama going on. And we start asking a lot of questions about the details of the situation versus really exploring the client's relationship to that situation, which is the thing that they have control over, right? Like how many of us has a client who's in the middle of some sort of dramatic situation, maybe at work, maybe somewhere else in their life, and we're talking about the situation. Who in that equation has control over that situation? You, the client? Probably not, right? What we have control over is our response to the situation. So how we are looking at our response to the situation becomes incredibly important. That's the relationship to the situation. And I think another blind spot is believing that it's our job to solve, fix, or make the situation better for the client. Make them get the learning that they need so that they can show up the way that we think would be most useful. So I use this Entrust mnemonic of explore, notice, transfer, reflect, unhook, savor, and trust. So entrust your clients and trust to them that they have the knowing. So I have a couple little exercises and people can put this into the chat. It'll be great, where how we ask questions will either increase the speed at which the client feels trust or decrease it. And so I have a few questions with A, B, C answers. So let's go to the first one. Your client says something to the effect of, this step kind of scares me. What I think I'm going to be asked to do is big and I won't necessarily fail, but they might think of me differently. And I'm not up to their standards when it comes to that piece of the work that I'm doing. Does that make sense? Of the answers that a coach might possibly give, which of these answers most reflects building more trust and safety? A, It does. I totally know how you feel. It's hard when you must do something feeling unsure, and then there's all that pressure to succeed. It totally makes sense. B, I hear your fear of failure. What would you want to start with those? Which of those two topics? You talked a little bit about next steps and moving forward, and a little bit about the seeds of doubt. Or C, I appreciate you sharing this awareness. When you hear yourself say that, what is important to explore? All right, I have a room full of smarty pantses. Yeah, C. It's the simple question. It's also the one that invites the client to name the direction that they want to explore. And as the coach, we sometimes think that part of that reflective listening is that we have to reflect back everything that the client just said, and we don't actually. We can sum it up. If I had said something to the effect of, you know, I'm really hearing it that scares you, and that this is a big thing, and you don't want to fail, but they might think of you differently. What we're doing is we're reflectively listening, but we're not capturing the essence of what they're saying. So it's an opportunity. You know, I really appreciate that maybe I'm hearing some concerns show up in this as you're talking. When you hear yourself say that, what would be important to explore? There's a myriad of ways to ask this question, but C in this particular case is probably the answer which most cultivates trust and safety. Here's the next situation. I feel defeated and stressed out. It's like, you know, things did turn out the way I wanted them to, or I feel like I didn't handle a situation the way I should have handled the situation, or I started role playing in my head and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I just become immobile. And I think that was supposed to be things didn't turn out the way I wanted them to. So here are our three answers. So that's that part of it, overthinking. You're overthinking it. Am I hearing you say that when you get like that, everything stops? So give me an example of a time you did accomplish something and you felt good, not defeated. B, I'm hearing a powerful negative getting triggered. What are you noticing? Or C, if you were to change that, how would that make you feel? Yeah, throw it into the chat. Jackie's our first one. Yeah. B, B, C, B. I don't think that B is the wrong question. I think that could be a really useful one. And I think C is a really, really useful one also, right? But I think what makes B the more useful of the questions is because what we're doing is we're naming what we've noticed. I'm hearing a powerful narrative get triggered. What are you noticing? It's that observation with a question, reflect and question. In C, instead of noticing that narrative, we're stepping over it and we're just asking them how, if they were to change it without exploring it, how would that make them feel? And that is leading in a different way. We use words like, what do you think? How does that make you feel? What do you want to do? And these lead the client in a place that isn't necessarily around what would allow them to explore what is below the surface for them. So if you were to change that, how would that make you feel? Doesn't do the same thing as if you were to change that, what might be the first place to take a step? Right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with C, but I would go with, I think B is the more powerful at cultivating trust and safety. Here's our final one, I believe. Your client says, I have several areas that I would like to explore today. I have been hesitant about speaking up in meetings and I need some strategies about how to share my value. I've been uneasy about doing this because I'm new to the organization. So now we know what they wanted to explore. Coaching responses to cultivate more trust and safety. A, well, I think those are normal feelings. And what I notice as you talked about that is, am I adding value? So the question that comes to my mind is, who evaluates the value of your contribution? Or B, let's start with exploring the strategies. Is that okay? I think I can help you overcome that challenge in our time together today. What would strategies do for you? Or third question, When you consider what you just said, what's most drawing importance is the place to explore first. Yeah, I'm going to go with C also. B, the problem with B is, and it's not, again, all of these questions are fine in and of themselves, but when we're looking at cultivating more trust and safety and having the client determine the direction of the conversation, when the coach says something to the effect of, let's start with exploring the strategies, okay? I think that would help you overcome the challenge in our time together today. The coach has just determined what the client should be talking about for the session. So I'm going to go with C myself. When you consider what was just said, what is most drawing as important as a place to start to explore? And I think that what that does is it invites the client then to go back to this, and they can say, you know, I think I'd like to start with looking at strategies. They might say that, or they might say, you know, I've been feeling really uneasy about being new and how to show up and speak. That might be more important to them, but we want to give them the choice. We want to have them at choice as to what it is that where we're going to be exploring in the conversation. So how we ask questions is going to influence the way that we build and cultivate trust and safety in our conversations with our clients. And inviting them to determine the direction, determine what's important about the topic, what part of the topic they really want to explore, where they want to be at the end of the conversation, means that the coach's job is to hold the container or the map of a conversation and continually turning it back to the client in order to make meaning. So another thing that can sometimes happen, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment, another thing that I see happen in coaching conversations will look something like the coach has gotten a good solid agreement with their client. The client has said, this is what's really important for me. I really want to explore, you know, why I'm not showing up fully and speaking up yet. I know I'm new, but there's something else going on there. That's the piece I'd like to explore. And by the end of the conversation, what would make this useful? And the client says something to the effect of, I have more clarity. So we're moving from whatever this important topic is, this exploration, into clarity. Now we know our container. And somewhere in the middle of our coaching conversation, the client goes off into some field that we have no understanding of the connection to this topic and issue that they brought forward. Has this ever happened to anybody besides me? And you're just sort of like, I'm lost. I don't understand the connection. That is a great place to be transparent with the client, where we say, I think I've lost the thread of the connection for clarity. How does this support you having more clarity? And if it doesn't, the client will go, I don't think it does. I think I kind of went off on a tangent. Okay, well, where would we like to go back to in order to get more clarity? Because remember, we're holding what is really important to them by the end of the conversation. Or the client may say something to the effect of, it's all connected, and here are the connections that I'm making. But we take that away from them if we redirect them without inviting them to redirect us. We don't have to understand the meaning that they're making, because sometimes it's happening inside their head and they're not expressing it fully to us because they're so busy in their head making meaning. But it is our job to hear that tree that might be possibly falling in that particular field. And so asking the question, I'm a little confused here, but I don't know that it's confusing to you. How does this support your clarity? How does this support your awareness around what's stopping you from talking up in meetings? What is showing up for you in this moment that you really want to hold on to, that'll be useful to support you as you start to speak up more, right? Again, questions only the client can answer. Any questions at this point around what we've been talking about? Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. So again, clients, we have this privilege to work with other human beings. And as such, we have an opportunity to be fully present with them, to lay our hand lightly upon their shoulder and allow them to lead us through this internal landscape that they inhabit. allowing ourselves to be taught by them and inviting them to really explore what's meaningful and important. And I see that there's a hand that went up. Please come off mute and ask the question.
Yes, my question was more about how do you know when you need to stop pushing your client? Because I understand that as coaches, we need to guide our clients to move forward, basically. And sometimes during the conversation, you can spot something, and we are here to guide them to make progress, basically. And I understand that we need to respect the fact that sometimes they don't want to share everything. But again, we are here to guide them to make progress. So it can be very tricky to find the boundaries and to know when to stop asking questions. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure that I do, so I'll make an effort to see if I understand. But what I think I hear you saying is that there's a sense that we're here to guide our clients towards progress and towards an outcome.
Yeah.
And how do we know when to stop asking questions? And I'm making an assumption here, so I just want to be transparent about my assumption that then when do we start telling them how to get towards their goals? Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's more, you know, sometimes they talk about a specific subject and they are dancing around another subject actually, and you can spot that at some points.
So how would you transparently notice that and ask them a question? So how do you offer the reflection of what you're noticing and then invite them to an answer?
Well, I may ask question like, it seems to me that there are more than just one subject here in the conversation or something like that.
Yeah, and so what's the follow-up question to that?
I don't know, I'm not sure.
That's awesome. But I think you're right on point. You're good with the reflection, right?
Yes.
I'm noticing that there might be more than one topic here.
Yeah.
Which one, or how are they connected? Or is there one that is more important for us to explore?
Okay.
Right? Because we don't want to assume that they're not connected. Those two topics may be very intersected for the client based on their experience and what they're exploring in their mind. So as the coach, you are noticing, I'm noticing that it seems like there's more than one topic here, but then we're asking the client to lead us towards which of either of them is most important, or how are they connected? Right? They may be connected, they may not be connected, neither of them might be important. But we want to ask the client because we don't want to assume from our experience and our vantage point that we know which one they should be exploring, because we don't. And we want that inside out learning for the client, because that's the learning that leads to sustainable changes. So I know it's this was the hardest learning edge for me, was letting go of the need to make sense of what the client was talking about. And I mean, I just had to sort of let go of it at one point. And I have an interesting experience that I had doing a coaching demonstration in China. And I literally could only understand every third or fourth word that the client said. I really didn't understand the other words. And so as we were going through the coaching conversation, I really just trusted that I would just go through the conversation. I would create the container. What's really important here? He said some stuff, I don't know what it was. And then I said, and that seems really exciting. Where would you like to be at the end? And he said some stuff and I really didn't understand. And then I just followed the energy that he showed up with. Like, I'm noticing as you say that like your energy just went down. What happened there? And he explored that. Didn't understand any of it. I noticed as that was happening, like you got really enthusiastic. What happened there? Explain some more. right? By the end of the coaching conversation, I'm like, where are we with, you know, what you wanted to get by the end of the conversation? I'm using really open language because I don't even know what it is that he wanted to work on. I'm just holding and trusting that container of the conversation. And he said some other things. But what was really clear was he got exactly what he needed, and he had next steps that were going to move him forward towards what he said his goal was. And I didn't understand the conversation. What I read was the nonverbals, what I read was the tone of voice, what I read was the enthusiasm that showed up. And I think we rely too much on the meaning that we're making for people, and we lay that on top of them and assume that's the meaning that's important to them. And building trust and cultivating trust and safety in a conversation means we open ourselves up to not knowing. If it doesn't make sense to us, we have an absolute right to go, I'm not seeing the connection here. Could you please talk to me more about what the connection is between this and getting clarity by the end of our conversation, or how this is going to support you with leadership development, or whatever the goal is, right? But we want the client to name the meaning, and we don't want to assume that they're off in a field that's unimportant just because we don't know where they're coming from. Is that useful?
Yeah, very. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm going to just share a couple more slides here. So I throw this out here. I have a few free webinars that you guys can go to. If you're interested in the slides from today, I'll throw these in the chat so you guys can go and get them. And I also have with that a coaching demonstration from ICF Malaysia, so you can see that. I'm also on LinkedIn. But any questions or insights or things that are showing up for you guys today in this conversation of cultivating trust and safety? Yes, please come off mute and let's have a conversation.
Yes.
Vinzo? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
I can. You sound great. I understand all of your words also.
All right. Thank you. Great example, by the way, with when you don't quite understand the client. You did a great job. Thank you so much. And now, you being an experienced coach, my question to you is, at times when you coach people, they talk about a certain scenario too much, with too many details that are not going to benefit both parties.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's better to ask, to tell them during the session, or is it better before we sign the contract? Let's say you're signing someone for 4 sessions for 6 months. Is it better to let the coachee know that try to bottom line as much as you can, so that if we didn't say that in the contract, let's say you're coaching me and I go into a scenario where I'm saying too much details, Lyssa can go on and tell me, Vinzo, there's no need for all the details. I might not take it personal, but other coaches might. So what do you suggest?
I don't think that I would take that particular tack. So Vinzo, I might say something to you instead of, I'm noticing that there are a lot of details that are showing up. You can mute somebody. All right. I think I would say instead, I'm noticing that there are a lot of details that are showing up in this conversation today around this situation. When you hear yourself share all those details, what's below the surface of all those details for you? And you might say, I'm so frustrated, or nobody listens to me, or whatever it is that you would say, right? It was like, so actually, what would you say if I asked you that, given your scenario in your head?
I would just directly go to the bottom line, and instead of wasting time for the both of us. Let's say you have a problem, Lyssa, and I ask you a question. You can just tell me, yeah, I have a fear of criticism, as simple as that, instead of going all around beating around the bush.
Yeah. And so what about your fear of criticism would be most useful for us to explore then in this conversation?
Look where it's coming from, first of all, get to the root cause, and then accept it, and then start letting it go. And we have tons of techniques with coaching to do that.
Yeah. So as you hear the questions that I might ask the client, what are you noticing in yourself as the difference versus me saying, Vinzo, I noticed there's a lot of details. Could you please just bottom line this for me?
That's just too much. People might take it personal. So the way you asked was extremely good.
Yeah, I mean, we want to keep people's brain in that open, creative mindset. And honestly, this is my experience at any rate. We have so much inner criticism of ourselves, like we don't need any help from external places, and certainly not from our coach. So the more we can be just really compassionate and kind with our clients, like I'm noticing a lot of details here. I'm wondering what the details tell you, or what's important about the details for you. That just is it's a more authentically empathetic way of asking the question versus bottom line, this story, man, I'm getting bored.
Yeah, you're totally right.
So
Thank
other
you so much.
questions? Oh, and thank you, Samantha. Yay. Any other questions as we're coming to a close here? I know we only have a minute or so left. I'm happy to stay just a bit longer, but any other questions? No. All right. Well, Samina, I pass it back to you, my friend.
Thank you, Lyssa. It was amazing to hear you and see your presentation today. I'm sure everyone has learned a lot, improved their coaching toolkit, and personally for me, I'm sure almost everyone will agree. In the questions, in the scenarios that you displayed, and the 3 options that were given, I'm sure all of us saw our own styles being reflected there. So it was great learning to identify and be aware of it as coaches, where we were coming from and perhaps where we should be moving to. So thank you so much.
That makes me so happy. So I'm feeling a big happy heart right now. Yeah, and coaching is a journey. I mean, I have my MCC, but it's just a mile marker. Honestly, it doesn't mean I'm the best coach in the world. It means I'm on a learning journey. We're all on a learning journey, and that's what I love about these type of webinars also.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here with us at Coach Transformation Academy's Transformational Tuesdays, where we hope to make just a little bit of a difference in the life of our students and learners and coaches here, so that they can pass on the favors ahead to their clients and improve their partnership and build trust and trusting relationships. So
Thank you so
thank
much
you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, to all the attendees here. Have a good night and hope to see you all and more back on Transformational Tuesdays next week. Have a great night. Thank you.
Samina, is there anything that I need to do?